Made possible through support from the Arc of Aurora, Arc Thrift Stores, Developmental Pathways, and the Limbaugh Law Firm. A THINK+change training.
Hey everyone, Hani Rayleigh with the Arc of Aurora and THINK+change back again for our Dating and Relationships for People with Disabilities series. Episode 3, I talked with you last time about wanting to engage someone that has a specialty in this area. And I'm super grateful that Von Limbaugh is joining us from the Limbaugh Law Firm, specializing in providing legal support to families as well as people with disabilities in this exact area. So thank you, Vaughn, for joining us. Sure appreciate your time.
Sure. Thank you, honey. How are you?
Doing great. Living the dream. Well, so the advocacy team and I in previous episodes had talked a lot about what it means to be a person in a relationship and some of the ways in which you can manage around the marriage penalty, as well as things that you just have to consider when moving forward in a loving, consenting relationship. But we wanted to ask you, are there some specific legal, unique legal things that people with disabilities need to consider if they're looking forward to potentially marriage and doing it legally?
Sure. The first thing that always pops into mind is, what kind of services, do the individuals receive, and what's going to happen if they do become married to their services. And that depends a lot on, what that marriage relationship is going to look like, or even if it's not a marital relationship, sometimes people will be in the same household or something like that. So there are a whole lot of, factors and a whole lot of things that go into the mix. But, sometimes we look at an individual with special needs who wants to get married, and we say, okay, so if you get married, this is what's going to happen to your benefits. Right? Are they going to increase? Is your spouse going to be penalized? Things like that. So, it's always a good idea to talk to people and don't just assume that things are going to be fine and that there won't be any side effects or repercussions to getting married. So
for sure. Does it make sense for a person with a disability or a couple in a relationship to talk with a lawyer or a navigator? What would be your suggestion when they're weighing their options?
I think someone who knows about, doesn't necessarily have to be a lawyer. That sounds really official. Although I will tell you, it's a good idea to talk to an attorney if you have any questions, and, is a prenuptial something that we should look at, stuff like that. But just someone that is informed about, your benefits, what's going to happen, and are you going to be able to stay at the same place? Or are you going to have to move? What's that going to look like? So just someone that can, kind of work through those issues with you.
Great.
The other is, do you have the capacity to enter into a marriage?
Mm-hmm.
And then, that becomes important because, in Colorado, we recognize common law marriage. And so sometimes people can get married without having to go through an official ceremony. And so that sometimes people are surprised to find someone else, their partner, they've always considered a partner, saying, hey, wait a second, we've been married.
For sure.
And so that does happen. And then we look at, did the person have the ability to consent to that marriage? You look at capacity and things like that. So, and for sure, if someone has a guardian or conservator, those people, the guardian and conservator, need to be more involved in the situation, because, in fact, you might need the guardian to go to court to get approval for the marriage.
Oh, that's a great point. And
So,
is your advice the same if one person in the relationship has a disability and the other might not have a disability?
and even then, I think it's more important, because then you always have the specter of, is someone being taken advantage of, or are they likely to be taken advantage of?
Sure.
And
sure.
so, you want someone outside that relationship, whether it's a family member and whether it's a professional guardian or conservator, just to look into it to see what's going on. Because unfortunately, people with special needs are a vulnerable population, and they can be taken advantage of. And sometimes, we see these situations and we kind of scratch our heads and say, are they really interested in this person? Are they marrying them to be able to have access to their money or to their family money?
Yeah.
And it's always, sometimes we're wrong. Sometimes it's a real loving relationship, and that's awesome, but sometimes it's not. And that can really be devastating.
For sure. Well, and that leads me to kind of my next pondering. So let's say folks have reviewed the technicalities of marrying, what it does with their benefits, all those sort of things, and want to move forward with marrying. Is there anything that they can do to protect themselves or their relationships, knowing that lots of people might question the integrity of decision making for people with disabilities? Like when we talk about it, advanced directives or any kind of trusts or anything like that, are those things that help protect a married or unmarried couple?
Yeah, those things might be more important for the family if a person with special needs has family who who have significant assets they want to protect. That would be more
Sure.
for the family. I mean, the first thing is really address that capacity issue. Does the individual have the capacity or the ability to understand what it means to be married and to enter into that a contract or that agreement?
Sure.
And then once, if the answer is yes, or if the answer is no, and we go through the process of having the court to approve it, however that happens to be. But once you're married, then I say just accept that some people might question that,
Yeah.
and either come up with a standard answer or say, hey, this is our marriage, our life, and none of your business.
Yeah, absolutely. Like
Or
any
it's
one of us would.
yeah, right, or hey, thanks for caring, appreciate your care, but really we've got it taken care of,
Sure,
and
sure.
don't need to worry about it. So
Yeah. Well, and you don't have to be married to build into your advanced directive or a medical proxy
right,
your loved one or a trusted individual. So that might be another way,
right.
just to make sure that you've got the right people making decisions with or on behalf of you if you're unable to make them yourself.
Exactly, exactly. And and the more people you have in your corner, the less vulnerable you are. And
Absolutely.
so we always talk about having a really good support network, and that becomes so vital in all these situations. And let's say that the non-disabled spouse or the spouse who doesn't have disabilities, he or she, hopefully will plug into that network, and you'll have
Absolutely.
an even stronger team. So
Totally, totally. So let's say two people have decided to move forward and either they're married or not, but have decided to take the next step in their relationship and look at having a child or adopting a child. Is there any special considerations for people with disabilities when they have little ones join their family?
yeah, and that's a special issue because you've got a lot of constitutional rights and implications that come into those factors. Because the first thing is that a natural parent, whether that's by birth or by adoption, when you're the natural, the law presumes that you are capable of taking care of the child and you are that child's guardian,
Sure.
natural guardian. And until that's proven otherwise, you're able to make all the decisions for that child. Sometimes what you see with people who have special needs or disabilities, and it totally depends on what those are. Sometimes human services will get involved. And the
Yeah.
question for human services or child protective services, depending on the county, is what's in the best interest of the child.
Sure.
And they may look at, do these individuals, do the parents have the ability to take care of the children?
Mhm.
And sometimes children are removed at birth or shortly after birth and placed in someone else's care, either foster care or in another family's care. And it could be another family member's care. So sometimes you have grandparents raising kids and things like that.
Yeah.
And that's just because social services, human services, they determine that the parents, for whatever reason, can't take care of the child.
Sure. Sure.
And so that could be anything from, maybe they're not physically able to take care of the child. Maybe they're not emotionally or mentally able to take care of the child. And so the government or the state at that point, they're really interested in making sure that the child's best interests are met. So
Yeah, and that seems like another really good time to engage your larger network and team. I
right,
know that from an advocacy point of view, there's often ways in which we can support that individual in getting additional supports in order to learn, parenting skills.
right,
Most of us, having had a child, didn't really know what they were getting into up front. And so if
right.
there's ways in which that support team can really, provide that wraparound care for the family, that seems like a good first option. So, but I love
Mhm.
that idea that, it's really, there are constitutional rights that you're guaranteed as being a natural parent,
Right.
but that there might be some unique pieces to consider for people with disabilities. For sure.
Exactly. And sometimes in a divorce or a legal separation, if one of the spouses doesn't have disabilities, they may try to shade the other spouse during the
Yeah.
parenting time portion and say, hey, my soon-to-be ex-spouse here can't take care of the kids, so therefore give in those situations, it's really important that you have either an attorney or a guardian ad litem, somebody in
Mhm.
your corner that can say, hey, maybe I can't take care of the child 100% of the time, but you know what? I should have really liberal visitation rights.
Absolutely.
And, here's what I can do instead of focusing on like if you focus on what the ability is, what I can do.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
like you said, in a family circumstance, maybe I can't do X, Y, and Z, but hey, guess what? I can hold the child, I can feed on the bottle, I can, whatever it happens to be. And if you need supports for that, then that's fine too. So
Sure. Excellent. Well, one other piece that I'm curious about, and I touched on it real early. Can you just tell us generally what is estate planning? Is it something that people in a married or even unmarried situation and people with disabilities, is it something they should consider?
absolutely. And you look at estate planning as you're planning for the inevitable.
Got
And
it.
we tell people you're either planning for death or you're planning for a period of incapacity. And
Mhm.
so, those, because a lot of people don't realize this, but most of us are more likely to become disabled or incapacitated in any given year than we are to pass away. So
Yeah.
that's something we work with folks on, just to understand that. And estate planning can be powers of attorney, general power of attorney, medical power of attorney, what's called a living will or an advanced directive, talking about life support issues. And it's really who's going to be there to make decisions for you. And then it also includes things like wills and trusts that said, hey, after I pass away, what's going to happen to my property? And that's important, I think, for families who have children who have special needs, for sure. There needs to be some special planning around that.
Mhm.
And if you are in a relationship with your person with special needs, yeah, definitely let's look and see how that can fit into what you've got. Usually, you have a guardian and conservator. You can still have a will. If you have a guardian, you might need to go to the court to get the will approved by the judge. But
Okay.
and that happens all the time. And they look at where you want your stuff to go, and it's letting your voice be heard. And you know what? If I'm a person with special needs, so what? I've got something, and I want to make sure it goes to my niece or my nephew or whomever. You've got that right, and
Yeah.
be vocal and make sure that it goes where you want it to go.
Sure. And so, I mean, it sounds like best practice for everyone, but wondering, for people that sometimes capacity is questioned and decision making generally is questioned, it feels pretty important if you have assets and if you're in a loving relationship to have it, legally codified before the inevitable happens.
Absolutely,
Okay.
absolutely,
That makes total sense. And it's a good reminder for the rest of us, that, planning for the future is important, um,
absolutely,
for sure.
absolutely. And it's one of those
Well,
things too.
oh,
If an individual, you know, depending on what their capacity is. So maybe if they have just a conservator, they can still do a will by themselves. They don't need to go to court necessarily. There's
okay,
that option always. The conservator can get it approved. But if you have a guardian, there's a legal determination that you're incapacitated at that point. So that should be court approved. But
sure.
and I tell people, even if you're just writing stuff down, this is what I want. That can be better than nothing.
That's a
So.
great point. Excellent. Well, Bon, is there anything else that we should know? Anything else that people with disabilities looking for a married or unmarried relationship might consider?
I think the big thing is, stand up for yourself, right? And realize that you've got as many rights and just as much rights as any other person to marry, to divorce, whatever that happens to be. On a functional basis, you might need some extra supports, and don't be afraid to reach out and
Sure.
make sure that you've got people in your corner. And hopefully there are people in your corner. Um, and if not, then, how can we get, help for you? So.
Absolutely. A good recommendation is reaching out to an advocacy organization in your area to help you get connected. So this has been fabulous, Vaughn. I so appreciate your time. We're grateful for your expertise. And everyone in the internet world, thank you so much for tuning in. Stay tuned to upcoming THINK+change and Arc of Aurora products. Thank
Fantastic.
you.
Thanks, Honey. Bye-bye.
Yeah, take care.
THINK+change. Talks, trainings, and tools to help in your work for or with people with intellectual and other developmental disabilities. Learn more at www.thinkchange.training.